Few cartel kingpins are as feared or notorious as Joaquin Guzman, better known as El Chapo. He once ruled the Sinaloa cartel. At his peak he was bringing in $3 billion each year. He controlled half of the entire Mexican narcotics trade. He owned a couple of yachts, a fleet of Lear jets, a diamond-encrusted pistol, and a private zoo with tigers, crocodiles and panthers. But he wasn't just a good businessman. He was a ruthless criminal who climbed the cartel pyramid by killing, maiming and bribing. It was no surprise that there was a $5 million reward on his head. El Chapo was arrested and sent to prison twice, but he escaped. However, after the third arrest in 2016, he was sent to a maximum security prison in the US. A prison that is so tough, no one has ever escaped. Let's explore every detail about El Chapo's Supermax prison and how the once terrifying kingpin lives his life today. Back when El Chapo was arrested in Guatemala in 1993, he already was a notorious criminal. He entered the narcotics trade at a very young age in progress with the help of Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, better known as El Patrino, Spanish for the Godfather. He was the leader of the famous Guadalajara cartel and the godfather of all modern cartels. Félix Gallardo was arrested in 1989. Chapo saw this as a great opportunity where he could start his own cartel, which is known today as the Sinaloa cartel. El Chapo became the new leader of the drug trade in Mexico. However, in 1993 he was arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison, but in 2001, he escaped in a prison laundry cart after bribing prison officials approximately $2.5 million. El Chapo had been on the run for 13 years before he was arrested again in 2014. He was sent to a maximum security prison in Mexico, but bribery and a giant fortune meant that El Chapo could get away again. El Chapo orchestrated his most historical escape where he used the team to build an underground tunnel under his prison cell shower, but El Chapo still couldn't stay off the radar. He had already escaped from prison twice and the DEA was fighting hard to have him extradited to the US and tried for his crimes on American soil. 2 years later in 2016 Joaquin, El Chapo Guzman, was once again arrested, except this time he was taken to the United States as soon as possible. You could have seen the fear on El Chapo's face from the very first minutes in the US airport. That's probably because he knew it was game over. In 2019, he was found guilty of a number of criminal charges related to his Sinaloa kingpin status. He ordered hits, bribed officials and supervised countless shipments. He was sentenced to life in prison in ADX Florence, Colorado on July 19, 2019. El Chapo arrived at his Colorado prison cell. He was now inside the same prison as the Unabomber in Oklahoma City bombing. These are super high-profile inmates that are considered particularly dangerous and prone to escaping, so their treatment inside the prison matches that. El Chapo, as well as his fellow inmates, spends 23 hours a day inside a soundproof cell. Their only hour of spare time is heavily monitored. Not only are prisoners monitored by several guards during spare time, but they're also cuffed and shackled, and their torsos are chained as well. They can't run, jump or do anything sudden. Of course, phones are also unwelcomed in the environment. In fact, the only kind of technology made available to them is a small black and white TV set in their cell, and inmates only receive this TV if they've demonstrated good behavior over a long period of time. This means, El Chapo gets to watch TV if he desires, but all the programs available are selected by the prison. So no streaming or HD TV. If this sounds extreme, it's only because ADX Florence was built especially for dangerous escape-prone convicts. ADX Florence is the highest security prison in the US, but it hasn't been around for a very long time. It opened its gates on November 30, 1994. The Florence Supermax was built as a result of several incidents and other US prisons during the 1980s. For example, security guards were stabbed to death at the Marriott Federal Prison, so ADX Florence set out to make a building impossible to escape where there are more guards than prisoners and a tight schedule that doesn't allow them to cause as much damage. This is why it's called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. ADX only hosts about 375 inmates. That's a small number if you consider the amount of effort they put into security gun towers around the prison. There are several rows of razor wire fences, and dozens of guards at every corner. So El Chapo won't be escaping anytime soon. But it's not just ADX Florence's security system that has people talking his life at the prison that's seriously debated. Here's what the warden said about the prison. I don't know what hell it is, but I do know that though the assumption would be for free person would be pretty close to extreme. At ADX Florence Supermax the inmates spend 23 hours in solitary confinement. According to the United Nations, this qualifies as torture. Worse than ignoring basic human rights. It is said that around a third of the floor and Supermax inmates suffer from severe mental illnesses. But after spending day after day in solitary confinement, the other 2/3 might discover some new mental health issues. In 2012 lawsuit against the ADX stated, it was alleged that years of isolation and almost no human contact had seriously eroded the social skills and the ability to adapt to ADX Florence inmates. The only contact with the outside world is a forest window, and looking out you can only see the sky. That way no inmate ever knows where their cell is. There are several accounts of ADX Florence inmates screaming for hours or hurting themselves as they simply go mad inside their tiny cells. Some mutilate their bodies with razors, shards of glass, sharpened chicken bones, writing utensils, and whatever other objects they can attain. One particularly creepy incident involving in the biting off both his pinky fingers during a psychotic episode. Is this something he would have done in the outside world or in another prison, or to the extreme isolation at the foreign Supermax lead to this terrifying moment? There also been cases of inmates taking their own lives in pretty gruesome ways. A number of swallow razor blades, nail clippers, parts of radios and television, broken glass and other dangerous objects. Inside the ADX prisoners aren't allowed to have contact with other prisoners. Their 1 hour of rack time is also spent alone in an empty room with a pull-up bar or a caged pen in the yard. After 3 years, and with a good behavior record, they can spend their spare hour talking to other inmates during an inmate's last year at the prison. They give for spare hours each day. They can also serve their meals with fellow inmates. But all of this is impossible for El Chapo. He will be spending the rest of his life inside the Florence Supermax. As of 2022 El Chapo has been at the ADX Florence for 3 years. His wife Emma has been fighting hard to earn him a more humane treatment of animals. El Chapo still has no human contact other than the minutes spent with the prison guards. He's being kept at range 13. The ADX block for the most dangerous criminals. He doesn't even have access to a normal shower. He gets washed with a hose. As he once dug a tunnel under his shower to escape prison. El Chapo, he has filed an appeal for his prison sentence. His lawyer stated, the deprivation of sunlight and fresh air over an extensive 27-month period is causing psychological scars. He is suffering many symptoms of distress as a result of his lengthy unwarranted punishment. Whether his punishment is unwarranted or not, that's up for you to decide. After all, El Chapo did have lots of people killed just to have more money and power within his cartel. But what should punishment entail? Should even the worst criminals be kept in maddening conditions? According to Emma and El Chapo's lawyers, he can barely sleep because the lights and the noisy air conditioning are always on. Furthermore, he complained that the guards are constantly chatting in the hallway, making rest virtually impossible. In the evening, complained that El Chapo's blood pressure is dangerously up these days, and she is worried for his life at the Florence Supermax. After the COVID-19 pandemic, visits were also suspended. So El Chapo couldn't see his family or his lawyers for a long time. At the moment, it's unclear just how much contact El Chapo is allowed with the outside world. But what's clear is that he is trying hard to escape the harsh conditions of ADX Florence. However, he won't be able to escape prison this time. Unless the appeal works. He will spend the rest of his life in the highest security prison in the United States. Does El Chapo deserve his current treatment? DEA Special Agent Ray Donovan said clearly. This is the kind of faith that a man responsible for unspeakable violence and death deserves. Thousands of people died or were ordered killed because of the Sinaloa cartel. So yeah, he doesn't leave his cell. It is boring. It's monotonous. It is very sad. But here's the difference. He's alive. And that means he could do plenty of things, unlike many of his victims. Do you agree or disagree with Ray Donovan? Should El Chapo or any prisoner really get more humane treatment no matter the gravity of their actions? Let me know down in the comments section, and before you go, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. You don't ever want to miss a new episode. See you all next time.